Hi, my name is Tess Kunik, and I'm joined by my mom, Honey Beuf, and we're so excited to be on Rebuilding the Beast. Today, we're going to be talking about our beautiful Liv, who we lost to suicide in 2019, a little bit about our grief journey, and about the power of creativity and how it can unlock fearless conversations, and how these conversations are important in busting the stigma around suicide.
Hey guys, welcome to Rebuilding the Beast. I'm your host, Festus Azili, NBA player turned podcast host. And on this show, I'm going to have a lot of my inspiring friends come on to share with you their rebuilding journeys. I hope you can take the tips from their lives and apply it to your life as well. Oh, and don't forget to hit subscribe, like, comment, share with a friend. All the things. All right, I'll see you guys soon. Welcome to the Rebuild the Beast podcast. Welcome. I'm so excited to have you guys on this podcast for a few reasons. One is we were connected through a mutual friend, and she told me about your project, and I am so inspired. The idea of this podcast is using your pain to help other people. It's about using your story, because your story could be a valuable resource. It could be someone else's survival guide. And that's exactly what you both are living, Honey and Tess. Mm-hmm. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having us.
We're so honored to be here.
Yes. You're both the founders of the Liv Project, determined to fight youth suicide. I know it's probably the hardest part to talk about, but it's the reason your amazing project exists. So I'd like to start with your own story. Sadly, you both lost somebody really beautiful. Honey, you lost your daughter. Tess, that was your sister. Tell us about Liv. What was she like?
Sure. I'll jump into that one. Liv was a 19-year-old sophomore at the University of Northern Colorado, majoring in early childhood education. And that school is about 45 minutes away from our home, which was in Niwot, Colorado. And Liv sadly passed away by suicide while she was up at school on January 8th of 2019. So we just passed her 3-year death anniversary. Liv was an incredibly spirited, incorrigible, beautiful human being who struggled with her mental health throughout her whole life. When she was 5, we had her evaluated because she was having some issues with coordination and a lot of sensory problems. And she was diagnosed with a nonverbal learning disability, as well as sensory processing disorder. And at that point, we immediately got her into therapy, and she continued therapy throughout her whole life. She struggled with depression and anxiety when she was in middle school. She, at 15, had gone to a party and was sexually assaulted and attempted to end her life after that. But she recovered, and we continued with her therapy. She had a psychiatrist. She was on multiple medications to try to level out her anxiety and depression. She had a wonderful therapist and a family that just loved her and adored her. But the mental illness was not what defined the person Liv was. Liv was beautiful. She was incredibly intelligent. She was literally the funniest person I've ever known. She had this really dark, dry wit. She was quick. She was musically gifted. She taught herself ukulele and piano. She was in 4 choirs in high school. She was in the high school musicals. She was very creative. She was also on the cheer team, which is funny because she was literally one of the most uncoordinated people you'd ever know. And she admitted that to everyone. But because of her effervescent personality, the cheer coach recognized that in her, this effervescent bright light. And the cheer coach put her on varsity cheer in high school.
Wow.
So
wow.
that was pretty fun. But the characteristic that I think is the most outstanding characteristic of Liv was her compassion and kindness towards others. And I think a lot of that came from the fact that she knew what it felt like to feel uncomfortable, to feel anxious or depressed. She felt her feelings so very deeply. And so she spent most of her life trying to bring happiness, kindness, and support to others. She always had a smile on her face. She was like known as the kid in the hallways who greeted everyone with a hug and a smile. And so when Liv passed away, our community was shaken to its core because they couldn't understand how someone who was so happy and effervescent would be so sad that she would want to end her life. So that's a snapshot of who Liv was.
And you told me. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I love that you started with that question because as a suicide loss survivor, excuse me, so someone who has lost someone to suicide, the best question, at least for me, is like, who was Liv? Tell me about her. Because there's so much stigma around it, people are really afraid to ask you about your person when really all you want to do is talk about your person and share funny stories and who she was. So I appreciate you starting with that.
In a post on Instagram, you described the pain and anguish, and you talked about the pain that your family felt after Liv's suicide, and you talked about it being unbearable. What was the hardest part in the moment or weeks that followed after, and how did you guys cope with that process?
Want to start, Tessie?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, the hardest part in the really soon aftermath, those first couple weeks, was waking up every day and realizing, oh, she's gone. Kind of having to relive the trauma every morning. And just getting through the days. I mean, we didn't want to eat. Sleep was weird, just our whole worlds were changed in an instant. And we were all of a sudden transported to like an alternate reality. That was our worst nightmare. So just like waking up every day and realizing that she was gone was so difficult.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I was feeling the same thing. Like waking up was like waking up to a nightmare. I mean, it felt like we were living a nightmare and nothing was taking it away. And I think the hardest thing for me initially was realizing that Liv was in so much pain, how hard it must have been for her to make that decision to end her life. And every time I would think about, what was going on for her in that moment, it just broke my heart and it shattered my heart in 20 million pieces. And I still struggle with that.
So, and this question's, Tess, you can start with this. How do you remember something that helped you through that grieving process?
Yeah. What helped me was telling my story and talking about her and talking about the like very kind of uncomfy feelings that are grief, and just talking and sharing. I come from a theater background, and so I've always found so much joy in telling stories, and have always processed whatever it is going on in my life through art making or storytelling in some way. So talking about her and beginning to share her story with different communities it really helped, because we were able to talk about who she was and share her, but also talk about how hard it is every moment of every day without her, and show that, that brutal truth. So that helped me.
So do you both feel like people coming up to you, and this is a podcast interview where we're talking about it, but if I was a friend and I wanted to help and I wanted to support and I wanted to talk to you, you feel like giving you an opportunity to talk about her would also be a good way to support you as well?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's like a release to be able to talk about her. And I love when people ask us more detail about who she was and what she was like. And they ask questions about, like, what was her favorite thing to drink or eat, or, what did she love watching? What was her favorite music? Engaging us brings so much comfort, at least to myself, to be able to literally talk about her, because I think so many people are so afraid to. I have friends who I've known for years who have kind of fallen away because they don't know how to talk about our loss, and they're afraid of it.
I think sometimes people feel like it's a sensitive subject, and so they try to, I don't know, even us people, we try to hide our feelings, and we try to, I had this conversation with a friend yesterday about men and how we don't have an outlet for our feelings. And so a lot of times we feel alone because in front of our guy friends, we mask it. It's like, oh yeah, let's go out and let's go do all this other things that mask the feeling that we're feeling inside. And you're really alone. And so I think it's important to have people that can ask you these questions and you can be vulnerable with as well. What was her favorite music, by the way?
Oh my gosh. Well, she was a musical theater nerd like myself. So she loved musicals, but she loved Billie Eilish big time. She loved to play her songs, sing her songs. She loved Adele also.
Adele, that's a really good one. Billie Eilish, my little sister put me onto her, and she can really sing.
Yeah, she's awesome.
Yeah, I remember driving in the car with Liv when she was, I don't know, maybe 15 or 16, and she was like, "Oh my God, Mom, you have to listen to this girl. Her name is Billie, and she's a kid. She's a kid, and listen how intense her voice is and the lyrics." And she loved her. She also loved Meghan Trainor.
Meghan Trainor. I don't know the artist, but I'll look out for her as well.
She like we were talking about earlier about kind of having an eclectic list of artists we like. Liv was that way. I mean, she could rap, she could rock, she could do the musical theater. She knew all the words. Like she had this amazing auditory skill where she could pick up words like that. So
she sounds very talented.
She was.
Mm-hmm. I want to dive a little bit into your project. And you're working with a bunch of artists, filmmakers, creatives whose lives have been touched by suicide. Can you give us some examples of the collaborations that you guys have made so far?
Yeah, so happy to talk about that. So, like I said, telling our story and using, storytelling as a vehicle to open up conversations. That's kind of where the Liv Project started, was us sharing our story. And finding that through these conversations, people would open up and share their own vulnerabilities or their own stories. And in sharing these conversations with different communities and folks, a lot of young people, teens and young adults, would approach us and they would say, "Thank you so much for sharing your story. How can I be a part of what you're doing? I want to talk about my mental health. I want to help spread your message. And the more we talked to different people, we found how much people really want to talk about this, but there is this fear there. And so we found that, okay, we got to get past this fear. How can we do that? And so we've been working with a film team for the past couple of years on a documentary called My Sister Liv. And that's really a love letter from myself to my sister, kind of sharing our story together. And then capturing conversations after her passing, conversations with her friends, conversations with various mental health professionals around the country, and asking these questions of like, what is happening? What can we do differently? So that's one of our projects. The other project is a game. It's a card game that we made in collaboration with this awesome agency called Humanaut. And the idea for the game sprouted from a lot of these conversations I was having with these young folks who wanted to participate in the project. And I would ask them, like, how do you communicate with your friends? How do you connect to each other in a way that's not super clinical or super boring or scary? And a lot of them said games. And, COVID had just hit. We were all in our homes trying to find ways to connect. And we thought we should build a game. And Liv loved games. She was a very big fan of Cards Against Humanity. So we partnered.
I love that game.
It's the best. It's the best. So we partnered with Humanaut and we gave them the brief of like, we want Cards Against Humanity, but for talking about our feelings and opening up conversations. And so we spent a few months, holding focus groups with the youth advisors and also consulting with mental health professionals and figuring out the dynamics. And so we've been sharing that game for the past year or so, and, been getting awesome, exciting feedback from people playing with their families to people playing, therapists having it in their office as conversation starters.
That was going to be my question, is if it's just for kids or if it's for everybody.
Yeah, so it's approved by mental health professionals for ages 13 and up. And it's, it can be played in small group settings with your friends or family, but we're also exploring in building some programming for the Liv Project around the game. So we've developed some workshops that we bring to different communities that encapsulate the game. So I will kind of take people through the process of some of the prompt cards, and then, we'll generate some community art together and just have a space to kind of use the game as a vehicle to spark our own conversations and creativity.
I cannot wait to get this game. I'm going to get it. I can't wait. I played a game on Instagram Live one day with people. It was that We're Not Really Strangers game. And it was amazing, but at the same time, incredibly, like, it was crazy how deep the conversations got. And I love that because that's what we want. We all want to connect in some way. And here you have people all over the country getting in on this Instagram Live action and just having conversation about, their deepest, darkest secrets. I'm like, wow, like people just want to connect. That's really the point of all this. I love this game that you created because it's encouraging people to talk about the monsters in their minds, which is kind of a funny way because this is rebuilding the beast, right? But that beast is also all these things that we go through, the things that we don't tell people about. And I really want to know more. What is it about this game? How does it work? How do you play the game? How do I win is what I want to know.
That's a great question. So the game, it's called The Game That Goes There, and it's a conversation starting game. I'll read you the two most important rules because I think they're very important. The first most important rule is be honest and don't be a jerk, which I think is a great rule. And then the second rule is you only have to go there if you want to. So you have an option to be like, nah, I don't want to talk about that. And that is, part of the function of the game. That's totally okay. So basically the way it works is there's 3 different levels of prompt cards of going there. So what would happen is the thought reader would pick a prompt card. So here's 3 of them, and they're all different levels. So we could start with a green, and they would read it aloud to the group. So this one says, a funny quirk I've had since childhood is, and then everyone in the group would write down their response on a little, these little thought bubbles. And then everyone would turn in their responses, and then the thought reader would read all the responses. Then you go around
guess who's who.
And guess who's who. And so that is how you ultimately win. There's 2 ways to win. You can guess the most, and you become the group's best friend, or by people being really stumped by your responses, and you become the one who really went there. So for people who love games, it's awesome because there's incentive to like have conversations with people. I could become the group's best friend.
I love this. I love this idea of just sharing your true self. Because I really have a problem with, and this is part of the reason why this podcast exists, because I feel like it's important to share our true stories, because we have this fascination with sharing, our faux lives, our Instagram lives, and I also think in some ways, I think that adds to this depression that people go through, because they look at other people's perfect lives on Instagram and they compare it to their own lives, and they're like, man, I'm not doing something right. Something about my life is not okay. Sorry, I kind of interrupted you there as you were finishing up. But.
No, I'm just like, yes, exactly that. Social media is such a...
Yeah, I feel like it contributes so much to the youth struggle with suicidal ideation. Do you feel like there are any warning signs?
Yeah, you want to talk about them, Mom?
Yeah, I mean, there are a variety of warning signs. Suddenly starting to isolate from others, sleeping more than usual, anger or reactivity. I'm trying to think. Tessie, you can throw in ideas as well, but any kind of sudden changes in the way someone typically acts is a warning sign. Someone giving things away, all of a sudden they're just giving items away, or talking about being a burden, feeling like they're a burden.
Feeling.
Why do you think so many youth struggle with that, with suicidal ideation?
I mean, for Liv, I think so much of her struggles came from kind of like what you were saying in terms of social media, like this idea that you have to be so perfect. You have to look a certain way. You have to be a certain way. You have to get these certain grades. You have to go to college, all these expectations that society puts on young people. And it's just too much. And all the information is right at their fingertips.
Fear of missing out, seeing that your friends are in a group together tonight, but you weren't invited. Things like that the kids right now have so much at their fingertips, and it's immediate, right? Like when I was a kid, you didn't find out something until the next day you were in school or whatever, but this is immediate. And also bullying online now is prevalent, and the numbers are skyrocketing. And I think in this past year, 25%, there was a 25% increase in youth depression and a 20% increase in youth anxiety just because of the pandemic. It's, kids being isolated also and not being in their schools, in their schools with their friends and their teachers. I mean, we're human beings. We need each other. And it's heartbreaking how much these kids are dealing with right now.
So what about for people who know someone who is struggling with those suicidal tendencies, or they know someone, how can they best be of help?
That is such a good question, and a question I really didn't know the answer to until after Liv passed. And we've learned so much in talking with mental health professionals and youth. And I think for me, learning that if you ask someone if they are suicidal or having thoughts of suicide, it's not going to put the idea in their head. That is a myth. And I found that soon after Liv died on NAMI's website, the National Alliance on Mental Illness. So it's okay to say the word to someone. And our mental health director at the Liv Project, she's a therapist, and she says saying the word can give people relief, and letting them know, like, oh, I don't have to hold on to this secret all by myself. Someone is inviting me in to talk about it. Also, the Suicide Prevention Lifeline is 24 hours a day. You can call anytime, and a trained, crisis interventionist will speak with you. Also, the crisis text line, which is something I don't know if Liv knew about, and I wish I had known about too, is, some people aren't comfortable speaking or talking on the phone, but there's an organization called Crisis Text Line where you can text them any hour of the day, and a crisis counselor will chat with you and talk with you via text. So just like not being afraid to ask, and also knowing that there are resources out there when you are in those moments of heightened crisis.
I also think that one of the things I wish I had known as a parent was when you see your child struggling, don't try to solve the problem. I mean, as parents, we are all about, we got to fix this. We got to put a Band-Aid on the boo-boo. That's the way I parented. And I found out after Liv died that really the best thing that anyone can do, a parent, a friend, a sibling, is be there and listen to them and validate their feelings and be there with them as long as they need while they're going through these struggles, and just let them know, I'm here for you. I love you. I'm not going anywhere. And I'm going to help you through this. And we can either text crisis text line, we can call the National Suicide Hotline, I can call your therapist for you. Just be with your person, be there for them.
There's a ripple effect that also happens with suicide. One of our previous guests, Taylor, he lost his mom to suicide, and he talked about going into a deep, dark hole. And he struggled with alcohol abuse. Do you have any advice on how to take care of your own mental health when you're faced with such a hard-hitting blow as losing someone?
I think that's such a good question, because when you do lose someone to suicide, you are now at greater risk of, that is a risk factor now for you. And it's hard to take care of ourselves. And I think what I am continuing to try to work on is like treating myself like I would treat the people I love the most, and just giving myself a break and showing myself grace, and, just sitting in the discomfort of it, but also being like, it's okay. It's okay to feel as bad as you feel. Yeah.
Yeah, but how do you learn that? How do you decide? Do you just one day wake up and say, okay, I'm gonna give myself grace? Or do you have books that you read? Do you have therapists that you go see? Or like, what is it that has helped you in those deep, dark times?
I mean, for myself, I went into that deep, dark time and I isolated. I found that isolating, but that made it worse for me. Therapy, I found an incredible grief counselor here who has really helped me through the journey. Reading, yes, Tess and I both ordered like every book there was on grief, and especially suicide loss. We found a wonderful book who's written by someone who actually attended the same high school that all three of my kids went to. A book for suicide loss survivors of siblings. So I think,
Wow.
all these amazing.
You know what it's called?
What is it called, Tess? Do you remember?
Called Still With Us.
Yeah.
Still With Us. That's actually, that is a great, because this just happened last night. So last night I was with a friend of mine, and he just lost his dad. And his dad was a little older. And so we were having a conversation about feeling lonely. How do you feel when you lose a parent? Because that's really close, and sometimes it feels like a protective arm over you.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, it hurts, but honestly, I feel like he's still with us. When you lose somebody, they're still there. Now they're there all the time. And I just thought it was such a beautiful way to think about it. And now you say that there's a book called Still With Us. That's true. Is that how you feel now?
Yeah.
I think so. Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I talk to her all the time. I can feel her presence. Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about therapy.
Yeah.
It's another thing that I feel like is stigmatized as well.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to know, and I recommend that to everybody. I had my own bouts, and I needed to go to a therapist. I needed somebody to even help me trust my body again. I was in a wheelchair for 6 months, and that was even the start to this whole process, where I understood that people need a place to go when they are in their hole, no matter what it is that you're suffering from: loss, grief, injuries, sickness, whatever it is. Is there something, do you remember a certain session, a breakthrough moment that you went through? Is there something that they asked you that made you help you start climbing out, gave you a chance to look out to the light?
That's a really good question.
I think for me, like I have been in therapy for many years, before losing Liv, but after losing Liv, I found that grief is such an isolating process, because, even though me and Mom, we lost the same person, she was a different person to us. She was her daughter, she was my sister. And so I felt like I lost that identity for a long time. I thought, my sister's gone. I'm not her sister anymore. She's not my sister. And just getting those feelings out to someone, a third party who's not living in it, was so helpful for me to just get perspective and see, like, yes, you are still her sister, by talking about her all the time, by sharing her story, by doing this project in her name. You're still, I still have a relationship with her. I'm just trying to figure out what it is, what it means, how we do it. But just being able to talk with someone and have them, kind of reassure me and affirm, like, she's gone, but you're still her sister, and you're doing the best you can.
What about you, honey?
Yeah, I think one of the beautiful things about my grief counselor is that she's also a very spiritual person, and she helps me to explore the actual feelings that I'm having and how I feel physically, like how my body is reacting to my grief and my loss. And she's always able to bring me back to the fact that my grief is my love. It's my love for Liv, and also reminding me that Liv is here. She knows how much we miss her. She is supporting this journey we're on right now with the Liv Project, because she wants us to make a difference and to prevent other families and communities from feeling this kind of horrible pain. So my grief counselor has this beautiful way of framing things. And so I give her a lot of credit for that.
Thank you so much. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Sorry. I also wanted to say, my family and my dearest friends, the fact that we are so open about this experience and open about talking about how we're feeling has really helped too. Because again, I kind of shut down and don't usually emote. But this process has really taught me how important it is to like let it go, So
I'm really grateful for what you are doing, what you both are doing for the Liv Project, for the good that you're doing in the world. I'm really happy that you were able to climb and you keep climbing out of the hole and keep rebuilding. And you're not just doing it for yourselves, you're doing it for other people as well, because you felt the pain and said, I don't want anybody else to feel this same pain. Do you have proud moments from this Liv Project? And maybe you could tell me more about it and what you guys are doing, what you have in store for the future. But do you have proud moments of things that have happened in the past and accomplishments of conversations that you've started and sparked?
Yes, love that question. I think my proudest moment is that we've been able to build this awesome group of youth advisors in such an organic way by them saying, I want to talk about mental health. How can I be part of this? And really me kind of stepping back and listening to them and what they want and what they're feeling has been such a learning experience for me. And there's one young woman who in particular who heard our story and said, I have been suicidal in the past. My depression's not better, but thank you for sharing your story because I no longer think suicide is an option for me. And if we can do that for one person, that's it. That's the most proud, best result we could have. So just hearing those stories, and another one of my proudest moments too was hearing from a grandfather in his early 80s. We had spoken on a panel and he said, I'm going to call my 16-year-old grandson tomorrow and talk to him because I know he's struggling and we've never talked about it. And that blew my mind in the best way because I never talked to my grandfather about, my emotions or, what Liv was going through. And that was such a beautiful, tender moment across generations that I think is really cool.
That's an amazing work that you're doing. Honey, any moments stick out to you as well?
It's so funny. Tess just told the story that I was going to relay about this thing. The grandfather really struck me because we're used to hearing from young people about how impactful our work is, which, by the way, never gets old. It fills my heart with so much hope and joy for the work that we're doing. But when we heard that granddad say that, I was like, yes, we're actually even getting to older folks and encouraging our work is encouraging an older person to reach out to someone younger and have that open conversation. Because I think, like what Tess said about she never shared with her grandparents about her struggles, I think it's really amazing to get the older generation starting to talk openly with the younger generation because it's been so stigmatized,
Yeah.
So, yeah.
My final question, and this is one of my favorites. I would actually like to rephrase it. What I usually ask people is, what would you say to your younger self? But, and if this is too emotional, please, we can skip this one. I'd like to ask you, what would you tell Liv right now, if you could speak to her?
I guess I would tell her that I miss her so much. She was the most extraordinary human being. And a day does not go by where I don't think about how hard her journey was, but that because of that, we are going to make a difference. In her name, we're going to make a difference. We're going to save lives. And I know I'm getting emotional, but she was so extraordinary. You were so extraordinary, Liv. And you're touching lives, even in a different place.
Yeah. I think I would say, first, I'm so sorry that you were in so much pain. And I miss you so much every moment. And thank you for teaching me how to listen to people and to share our story and also be open to hearing others. And I love you.
Like we said, she is with us and she hears you. Thank you so much. Thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for sharing your story. I want people to not feel alone. And I'm sure that people out there that need this story will hear it and feel like they're not alone. So thank you so much for sharing. Thank you so much for your time. This was more than anything I could imagine. Thank you.
Thank you
so much.
Hey, Fess is here. I hope you liked that episode. Don't forget to subscribe, like, comment, and here's some more episodes that you might like. On this side.